What's a cognitive neuro lab like? So what's your initial thought when you think of working in a lab? Let's see, you're probably visualizing my mentor partner me in long white lab coats. You're probably picturing us mixing strange chemicals in test tubes, then observing them with microscopes. But this is what I also expected when I learned that I would be working in a lab this summer. But it was actually quite different. Well, see, there's quite a difference in a biology lab and a cognitive neuroscience lab. In biology and chemistry labs, people are much more individually focused and often work with testing animals like rats. But in a cognitive neuroscience lab, you are more involved in working directly with people and community individuals. In my mentor Emily's experiment, we were testing if and how whether age affects human facial recognition. We learned that scientists are still debating whether humans are able to learn other human faces because they were born with the ability, or whether they just practice a lot. So in our experiment, there are these things called greebles. The greebles are computer engineered figures that were made to be unique, but still spatially represent human faces. They are classified into different families by similar features. In our lab, we test a person's ability to distinguish which family each greeble belonged to, and also whether he or she could recognize each individual greeble. We learned how to write and organize a grant, and how every researcher has to write one so they can get money to fund their experiment. Then we designed and made our own personal training program on the computer, just like the one we used in the Greeble experiment. We used the SuperLab software to make this program. It was very tedious and took a long time, but it would be a very crucial step in running a real experiment. We programmed the computer to show what the actual person would be tested would see. First, an image of an object would appear very quickly, and then a mass of assorted scribbled lines would follow. Quickly after that, a second image would appear. The person's objectives was to determine whether the image was the same or different. A person would first complete a series of practice trials to ensure that they completely understand the experiment. Once the person was finished with the practice trials, then they would start a total of 64 trials, with breaks of course. I learned that every person who works in a Cogneuro lab has to be familiar with all this computer programming. And that was surprising to me because I didn't know psychology labs would involve computer programming. Also, while working in a cognitive neuro lab, we practiced with another mentor, Steve Daniels, and worked with this device called the ERP. This was a pretty interesting gadget. It's a cap that resembles a swimming cap, and there are these little small cavities that each hold a sponge. Each sponge is to be filled with saline solution in order for it to be read by the computer. The purpose of this is so the computer can be able to read the person's brain waves. We contribute by placing the sponges into the ERP cap and filling them with saline solution. Then we can see the person's resulting brain waves.